again. Ongoing US airstrikes on jihadists in Iraq have not contained or broken the momentum of the militants. That's according to the Pentagon. Washington has so far been reluctant to launch another ground invasion, but is now beefing up the flow of weapons to the region. US officials say they're seeking to further undermine the so-called Islamic State by arming Kurdish resistance fighters in northern Iraq. So far, they're only sending light weapons and ammunition, but the Kurds want rocket launchers and tanks. As Artie's Garden Chichikan reports next, some of those weapons used by those jihadists were also made in America.
Thousands of Iraqis are helpless in the face of terror from the Islamic State. The jihadi militants are ruthless and well-armed.
The jihadist forces in Iraq are probably the strongest jihadist forces in the region and in the world. They are equipped with advanced American weapons, and that's how they were able to ethnic cleanse the minorities, Christian and Yazidi minorities, from many areas in Kurdistan or south of Kurdistan, and now they're attacking Kurdistan.
U.S. officials see no alternative to sending weapons to combat the extremists who now fight with American weapons.
You cannot confront ISIS with flowers.
At the same time, flooding an already deeply divided country with more weapons could backfire in the future.
There is no American military solution to the larger crisis in Iraq. The only lasting solution is for Iraqis to come together and form an inclusive government.
President Obama may want a unified Iraq, but the Kurds have long wanted out. And arming Kurdish militia forces could lead to a permanent breakup of Iraq.
Any peaceful cessation of the Kurds from Iraq would be unlikely, considering the region's several disputed and multi-ethnic cities, as well as major oil holdings in both Kurdish and contested territory. Now, as pressing as the Kurds' defense needs are, the question is whether the weapons provided for defense today could be used for offense at a later date. In Washington, I'm Gane Chichagyan, RT.
Well, every side of the conflict in Iraq is now using American weapons. Let's take a minute to look at how that happened then. The US military pulled out of the country in 2011, but they left a deadly legacy, more than $9 billion worth of weapons. Much of this American firepower was captured by Islamic State fighters sweeping into northern Iraq from Syria, where they'd already got hold of some weapons that Washington had supplied to anti-Assad forces. So now, with US arms being used on two sides of the barricades in Iraq, America's also having now to send more of its hardware to the Kurds to help them repel the jihadists. Former US Foreign Service employee Peter Van Buren told me some people are making a profit from this conflict.
The only people happy here are the American arms merchants. American weapons are being used to destroy other American weapons. If you're selling those weapons, that's called good business.
Mary Harf, the US State Department, she had something to say about what she thinks is the cause of all this. She's blaming Syria and Assad. Let's listen.
ISIS started really gaining strength in Syria when Assad, facilitated their rise, helped facilitate their movement into Iraq, and gave them a security environment in which they could operate. Prime Minister Maliki has been fighting a very serious battle against them in his own country. Yes, he could have governed more inclusively, but that's very different than allowing a terrorist group to flourish and indeed supporting them.
Mary, you're saying he facilitated their movement from Syria to Iraq. I mean, did you provide them with truck and transportation?
I don't have more specifics for you than that.
So you don't think that the Syrian regime was actually fighting ISIL in Syria?
Look, I know that they supported their rise and they helped facilitate them into Iraq. I know that.
I think this just shows the desperation of the State Department in particular and the U.S. government in general to try to paint this picture as something other than America's mistakes. ISIS, until very recently, was part of a broad Sunni group in Syria that was being supplied by the United States and was and still is being funded by American allies in Saudi and Kuwait and other Sunni states. Blaming Assad for all this is absolutely beyond my understanding how an intelligent person can even say that.
Washington's #1 ally has also weighed in from Europe. The UK is sending at least 3 fighter jets to Iraq now, as well as military helicopters. Here's our London correspondent, Polly Boyker.
Their objective is to get aid to tens and possibly hundreds of thousands of refugees that are trapped on a mountain in northern Iraq. Now, these refugees are from the Yazidi religious group. Now, this is people that have been brutally assaulted by ISIS fighters in recent weeks. They have said to have been tearing through their villages and just murdering hundreds of people. And a huge number of them are now stuck on this Mount Sinjar with no food and no water. We've also had from the Ministry of Defense reassurances that this is only a humanitarian mission. But we do know that surveillance, there are reports that the surveillance that these jets carry out will be shared with the US, that we know has been carrying out airstrikes against ISIS militants in Kurdistan. We also know that Parliament could be recalled so that members of Parliament can discuss the ongoing crisis.